So I have a ceramic store here in the south side of Fort Worth. I've been open at the physical location there on Magnolia for about a year and a half, and I quit my previous job about 3 years ago. My I have a BFA and an MFA in fine art, and I've always been making art. And when I quit teaching, I came back to ceramics.
Oh, that's really interesting. So, can you tell me a little bit more about what inspires your designs?
My designs are really about form. I'm not interested in surface decoration per se, so that you can see the form more. Um, a sentence that really resonates with me is how something can be simple but have such depth.
hmm Kendall, what drives you as an artist?
Ultimately, what drives me to be an artist is just using my hands. There's the physicality of clay that satisfies my soul.
Yeah, totally. I feel that.
And there's other things that I want to come across in my work that I was still interested in graduate school. And ultimately, once I get this form to the most reduced version where it can resonate, that I've always wanted my forms to be generous, poetic. uh, I want a sense of beauty. I want you to be able to read the images in a slow way. When I used to sit with students and we would critique a photograph, I would talk about how long can you look at it? Uh, and if you look at it quickly and you're like, I know that story, and you walk away, for us, we were looking for things that held the gaze longer. So I want my pieces to be slow. I want my pieces to be quiet. And I think my pieces are also about daily life. When I was in graduate school, I wasn't the student that was interested in the esoteric. You know, my favorite pieces at the museums in DC were folk art, which had a nice directness to it, and then just still lifes, or paintings about the kitchen. So in some ways, I like those uh, French Bernard Vuillard paintings about the kitchen and just our daily life. I'm just kind of simple in a way. It's part of your daily life, just a little piece of poetic. This is interesting. In today's times, my son asked me the other day, I said, this really makes you question what's important in your life. And he said, well, does art become commercial? Like, do you need that? And I was like, oh, no, no, no. It's the opposite more than ever, because now that little poetic form you have kind of resonates and hopefully kind of gets you through. I mean, art in all ways informs
Right.
day in, day out. I think there's something satisfying just about the physicality of the process. When I was in undergraduate school, I studied a lot of photography. And that was back in the day when you used your hands in the dark room. You rolled your film, you developed your film. I was interested in processes where you would paint the emulsion on the paper. I grew up on a farm, so we were always building fences outside. Ceramics is extremely physical, other than just on the wheel. I mean, loading the kiln, carrying your things around, mixing glaze. Even, I mean, people probably think I'm just talking about the making of ceramics, but the entire process and physicality of it interests me. It's just working woman's uh, art, maybe.
Right.
I enjoy that physicality.
Right. And can you tell me how you transitioned from painting into making ceramics?
Okay, good question. So I always had a fondness for ceramics. So when I was in graduate school in DC, I would go down to the Chinatown in DC, which is only about 2 blocks long. And then after graduate school, I moved back to Dallas. That's where my husband was. And probably in a couple years after graduate school, I took a community education ceramic class. And then when I started teaching, it was part of the curriculum. So I would use my teaching summer funds every year, professional development funds, to go take workshops on ceramics. And as the kids were growing up, I'd have a studio in the garage. And, when I wasn't doing something with them, I'd be in the garage making ceramics. And there were times that in my life that I could commit more and times I couldn't. And 3 years ago, quit teaching and went back to ceramics.
That's amazing. So you actually took a class in Fort Worth to learn?
I was living in Dallas at the time. So
Okay.
I took the community education classes in Dallas. I started SMU and then some of the Dallas community colleges. And then I've taken a lot of workshops in Santa Fe at Santa Fe Clay.
That's great. That's part of my journey too. I think these community education classes and, kind of, because I didn't, for my background, I also didn't study design, but that's something that inspired me was, going to community colleges and kind of doing these, non-traditional paths. And I think that's really exciting,
Right. This year I've already taken 2 workshops. I took one workshop on mixing your own glazes, the chemistry behind it.
Mm.
And then I just took another workshop in Austin about a new technique. So I'm always a student. And I think that was another reason I went to ceramics the past 3 years, or came back to it, is process and just kind of the curiosity of learning something new.
Right. Totally.
Huh.
And when did you know that you wanted to make this a business?
So I quit my job. I was at home being a mom, started making ceramics again, and you have all this pottery around. And so I went to a farmer's market, and they start selling, and then they start selling more. And then I live off Magnolia 3 blocks, and I was driving by my current location and saw for rent. That was a year and a half ago. And I was like, I can do this. My mom, growing up, had a small boutique shop, and ran her own store. So I kind of grew up in entrepreneurialism. Both my parents ran their own businesses. So it was a combination of being an artist and coming from parents that owned their own businesses.
Right, right. And what do you like about being in the near South Side community?
The near South Side community is heavenly. It's a village. You know how they say it takes a village to raise a child. As an adult, it takes a village to get Kendall through. I think because of the way the sidewalks, how the streets set up, Magnolia, the coffee shops, there's just a robust sense of community, knowing my neighbors, that, gosh, just feeds my soul.
Yeah.
I'm as often, during the day, I'll just walk out and onto the street and I'll talk to, someone, just one of my local neighbors, and we'll talk business or talk anything.
Right, right. Yeah, that's really beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. And I hope that we will all be able to go to our coffee shops and see our neighbors soon enough. And in the meantime, this is a great way to get to know Kendall Davis and the story behind your amazing creations in your store. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Glad to help. Glad to be here.